So they should have divided like a dozen MVP awards, and it didn't work out that way. Willie won two, and I think Hank might have won only one, which is almost impossible to believe.
A lot of relevant topics today, but really, it's your relationship with Willie and what Willie Mays meant to you. And just, I mean, I want to get to any stories and different things through your life and interactions with him.
Well, Willie was incredibly gracious to me. I interacted with him on the air and off. He exemplified not only the highest level of baseball skill, I think by consensus, he's the greatest five-tool player. There might have been some that were better in certain aspects statistically. There were some that might have been better hitters for average or for power if you measure it by slugging percentage or home runs per time at bat. But when you put all five of those tools together, I don't think anybody would have scored any higher, and probably no one as high as Willie Mays. But the other thing about him that statistics can't capture is just how much fun he was having playing baseball and how that transmitted to the average fan. I've said this before. If you took someone to a baseball game, someone who'd never seen a baseball game and didn't know a sacrifice bunt from a sacrifice fly, and Willie Mays was playing in that game, their eyes would immediately go to Willie Mays, even if he wasn't having a particularly big game. He could be 0 for 4. There might not be a chance for a spectacular play, but there was just something magnetic about his presence and the way he carried himself. He had style to spare. Everything he did was stylish. Catching a routine fly ball was stylish. The way he'd toss it back into the infield underhand was stylish. The way he carried himself from the on-deck circle to the plate, everything about him was a joy to watch, and you knew he was filled with joy doing it. And he had this boyish quality, Eric, that just lasted into old age. When he was in his 80s and 90s, when he talked about something that interested him, especially baseball, in that high-pitched voice, he might as well be the 20-year-old kid, romping around the outfield in the Polo Grounds for the New York Giants, because that's what was in his heart, that love of the game.
We've talked about top three players of all time. We've heard Babe Ruth, Willie Mays, and Hank Aaron are really up there for us. But all I hear today is ex-players and current players that interacted with him is about what he meant to them and what kind of role model. Is there more of a impacting role model that there was in the game?
Well, of course, Jackie Robinson inspired many people, including Hank Aaron. And there's a touching story about Hank as a young kid and the Brooklyn Dodgers barnstorming north toward Brooklyn from spring training in Florida, stopping in Mobile, and the 13-year-old Hank Aaron seeing Jackie Robinson climbing a tree because he didn't have money for the ticket beyond the outfield fence to peer into the ballpark to see him play, and getting the notion that I too now can play someday in the major leagues. So Jackie Robinson, I think, had that effect in a different way on many, many players, past and even present. But Willie was present around the game. Until about a year or two ago, he was a regular at the Giants games. He had his own suite at the ballpark. And when he would enter the locker room, and often he entered the visitors' locker room, wanted to see new players, wanted to see up-close players he'd heard about. And, of course, the waters parted when Willie walked into a clubhouse. And you could be a superstar like Barry Bonds or Ken Griffey Jr. or Mike Trout. If it was Willie Mays, well, then everything stopped. And the reverence, not just respect, the reverence that other players, his contemporaries and players today, had for him was palpable. And he reciprocated that by being so kind to everybody. If you wanted a relationship, if you were a ball player and wanted a relationship with Willie Mays, you had it. He'd give you advice. He'd give you encouragement. He wasn't like, hey, I might be the best who ever lived, so, consider yourself lucky that I give you 5 minutes of my time. No, he really engaged with everybody, especially players.
I want to talk about his actual skill on the field. You said the best five tool
Yeah.
that there was. I went through his baseball reference today,
Mm.
and I know WAR is not the end all be all, but it's something that we use as
Yeah.
like, how do we compare it to the other? He technically, if you're going by WAR, could have won, to my count, 8 MVPs. Do you feel like he was slighted too many times in not winning the MVP?
Well, you know what the MVP used to be for the most part. There were exceptions. But back when it was one league and you won the pennant and went to the World Series, being on the pennant winner or a team that went right to the wire was a huge edge. Now, there were exceptions, like Ernie Banks won it back to back, and the Cubs were a second division team both times. But if the question was, who's the best player in the National League, then for more than a decade, the answer had to be either Willie Mays or Hank Aaron. So they should have divided like a dozen MVP awards, and it didn't work out that way. Willie won two, and I think Hank might have won only one, which is
One.
almost
Yep.
impossible to believe. Um, until Barry Bonds came along, the record for most MVPs was three. I think Roy Campanella won three, Yogi Berra won three, Mickey Mantle won three in the American League, and probably should have won five. But that's a different conversation. But was Willie Mays the best player or the co-best player along with Hank Aaron? With all due respect to Frank Robinson, who was in the National League for a long while, and for Roberto Clemente, was Willie Mays or Hank Aaron the best player in the National League for a very long time? Yes, but that didn't mean you won the MVP every year because voters looked at it in a different way than they do now.
That's good. That's great insight from that time to see where we have the MVP voting right now. All right, last one for me from with Willie here.
Mm-hmm.
What's your favorite Willie Mays story? Your personal favorite Willie Mays story?
Well, I don't know if it's the best one, but it's one that pops to mind. You know, he had that high pitched voice. Bill White, who later became a baseball executive and a baseball announcer, but he was a very good first baseman. His career started with the Giants, I think, in New York. Then he was a Cardinal, and after that, a Philly. So now he's with the Cardinals, but he has a friendship with Willie Mays. So the Cardinals play a day game against the Giants at Candlestick Park, and Willie invites Bill White to come over to his house for dinner. And Bill brings Bob Gibson with him. And Gibson shows up. They ring the doorbell, and there's Gibson. And Gibson is wearing glasses, which he often did when he wasn't pitching, but he didn't wear them to pitch. And Willie opens the door, and he sees White, and he sees Gibson, and he looks at Gibson, and he goes, "You wear glasses? You're gonna kill somebody." And one thing about Willie was, you know, like Frank Robinson, you could throw one right under his chin, and he just stood right on top of the plate. You know, Don Drysdale, I think, hit him like 15 times or something because Don would come sidearm and he'd like to brush people back. In fact, Drysdale was famous for saying as he walked past a star player on the other team, "Where would you like one today?" So Drysdale and Frank Robinson, that was a thing. But Willie did not like to be thrown close to. Willie would bail a little bit. So it definitely concerned him that Bob Gibson might be squinting into Tim McCarver when Willie was in the batter's box.
That we need to look at. We need to get a split. Nowadays, we'd have a split. Ever since that story came out, Willie's been hitting X off of. If he
That's
found
right.
out that Bob Gibson doesn't wear glasses, like,
That's
there'd
right.
be a fear factor. But that
Well,
is tremendous. Go
you
ahead.
know, another thing, like Brian Kenny, who's great with this stuff, with the analytics and with digging deep into the numbers. And, you know, some things we just take on faith. Well, Candlestick Park wasn't a great park for Willie to hit in. And, you know, the winds were difficult. It was a difficult place to play. And yet, Brian had statistics today on the MLB network that showed during a prime chunk of his career, all of Willie's numbers were better at Candlestick Park than they were on the road. So maybe Candlestick didn't hurt him quite as much as we were led to believe.
That's good. So the numbers help paint a different story. I like that. Rickwood Field game.
Yeah.
It's going to happen tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
This was really, I mean, I think it's a great, great thing that MLB is doing. Is it going to be missing something without Willie, or is it going to be a great celebration of Willie's life?
Yeah. Well, we knew for a while that he wasn't going to be able to make it, even with a medevac plane. He just wasn't up to it, obviously. He was in his last days, and I kind of inferred that talking with some giant people that it wasn't just that he wasn't up to traveling, but that uh, his days were numbered. The game is a tribute, yes, to the Negro Leagues, but it was also designed as a tribute to Willie Mays, who played at Rickwood in Birmingham as a 17-year-old member of the Birmingham Black Barons in 1948. I think from the reaction when they announced Willie's passing at Rickwood last night, because they were playing a minor league game there as part of a days long celebration of the whole thing, and the reaction around baseball when it was announced at major league parks, I think his presence will be felt. And in a way, it's poignant and almost poetic that he would pass away at virtually the same time as this game is going to be played at Rickwood in his honor. And in a very important sense, he'll still be there.
And I think Major League Baseball is doing a good job of
Yeah.
celebrating that and putting it at a field that a lot of people didn't know. He played in the Negro League as a 17. Technically, I think if I got this right, as a 16-year-old, but then he got picked by the team and then he played his first year as a 17-year-old. Am I right in that?
I think that's right. I also know this, that when he was like 11, his dad was a very good player, amateur player, who taught him a lot about the game. And when he was 11 or 12, he was playing with men. He was playing with 18, 19, 20-year olds because he was that good.
That's incredible. And he took a year off for military service, I think in 1953. Also, like just things that if you don't know about Willie Mays, you better check. You better check his baseball reference page.
I'll tell you a couple of things about that. He missed most of 1952, which would have been his second year. He's a rookie in 51, and all of 53. Then he comes back in 54. He makes the famous World Series catch. And in 55, he hits 51 home runs. So let's say, conservatively, since he almost never missed a game, he averaged 150 games a year back when it was a 154 game season before expansion. For many years, he played virtually every game. So let's assume, conservatively, that he would have hit 30 home runs in 52 and in 53. Well, then you add those to his 660 home runs, lifetime home runs. I think he might have hit 4 or 5 before he went into the military in 52. But anyway, he gets past Babe Ruth's 714 before Hank Aaron does. Now, that doesn't mean that Hank wouldn't have overtaken him because Hank wound up at 755. But it changes the whole course of history if it happens that way, because then Hank doesn't face as much resentment and bigotry and the death threats and everything, because then he's chasing another black man instead of chasing the record of Babe Ruth, which bent some bigots out of shape. So the whole narrative would have been different. And I think in a way, it's just as well, because Henry Aaron was always the underappreciated one. Mantle and Mays were perhaps more glamorous. They started in New York. Mantle played his whole career in New York. They were very dynamic. And Hank, playing in Milwaukee, didn't get as much attention. And it was only when he started to climb up the statistical chart and eventually close in on Babe Ruth that people began to realize he belongs in that conversation with Willie Mays. And then all the vitriol came his way. And the way he handled it with decency and dignity. And he told me and others, he was such a humble guy. He said, the reason I wanted to hit 715 wasn't to be in the record books, it was to refute all the bigots. So he triumphed over them. And in the end, he's universally regarded not just as a great, great player, but as a significant civil rights hero, as a great American, which he was. So in a way, it's better because Willie has his place in history, and it's not diminished by having 660 instead of 715. Hank Aaron has his distinct place in history. When I think back on the great players, all of whom I was lucky enough to know and interview, and in some cases eulogize, from the generation before me, DiMaggio, Williams, Musial, then the next generation, the players I remember as a kid, Mays, Mantle, Aaron, you can throw Roberto Clemente in there. We're obsessed with ranking them, and I guess it's fun to rank them, But here's what's interesting. Nothing that any of them were diminishes what any of the others were. Ted Williams doesn't diminish Stan Musial. Musial's a different player in a different league in a different city. They each exist in a way that does not in any way diminish the other. Same thing with DiMaggio. His mystique is different. Mantle is like the star-crossed Roy Hobbs from the book and the movie The Natural. His story is about what might have been almost as much as what was. And Hank Aaron is the true all-time home run king who didn't just chase down Babe Ruth, he stared down bigotry. And Willie Mays is the greatest all-round player who exemplifies not only skill but joy. Each of them have their own distinct place. Roberto Clemente wasn't the power hitter that the others were, but he was obviously a distinctive and stylish player, and he died as a hero on a mission of mercy. They all have their place in baseball history, and without each of them, the story of the game would be less rich.
Not one without the other. I love
That's
that.
right.
That is a great soliloquy of baseball and how it all comes together. Everybody around it, every rule changes, everything that changes it. Kind of like talking about this whole ABS system stuff, the automatic ball strike system. Where do you think this? Did you see the news release that they had yesterday that they're moving it to in AAA and most likely it's going to be the challenge system once it makes
Yeah.
it to the big leagues?
Well, I think if you're going to have it at all, the challenge system makes the most sense. And there's actually a strategic aspect to that. Might be a hitter who's thinking about his own batting average that wants to use the challenge with 2 out and nobody on in the second inning. And the manager said, no, we need to use it in a more important situation. But if it's limited, I don't know how many, 3, 4, 5, certainly not more than that, limited to that many times a game. And the way I understand the technology, the verdict should be much quicker than most challenges on plays on the field, plays on the bases, whatever. I had one last night. I was doing the game on TBS, the Yankees and the Orioles, and there was a pickoff play at first base. Mateo of the Orioles was picked off, was ruled out, and it took a very long time before that call was upheld. You wouldn't have anything like that with an ABS system when it's balls and strikes. I think it would be almost immediate to get the verdict.
Do you think the strategy will be, because we talked about it yesterday, I have to let AJ use all the challenges because if I'm getting my 3 at-bats per week as the backup catcher and I'm using
Right.
them up, they're gonna put reins on me. They'll be like, I'll be sitting here like this, and they'll go, nope. So do you think the strategy will be different team to team?
Yes, and batter to batter, place in the lineup, circumstance in the game. You know, it may be a crucial situation late in the game with men on base, or it may be that you want Aaron Judge to get this extra swing, even though it's the third inning with 2 out and nobody on, and you wouldn't use it if it were a lesser player. That there is going to be a little bit of more than a little bit. There'll be some discretion involved, and it'll be interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Bob, thank you so much for coming on, talking about Willie. Nobody better to come on and give your time for us. We really appreciate it.
You know, I chased Bronny and AJ right out of the building. I don't understand this. What have I done to offend them? What can I do to get back in their good graces?
I don't think there's anything. It's your smashing good looks and your incredible voice. They were intimidated. I figured I'd stay on because I'm the uglier group part of the group, and I don't have that. I don't have the ego that they have. So you scared them off, just like a Bob Gibson with no glasses scared Willie Mays off.
Yeah. You're the everyman of the trio.
Yes.
There you go.
I remember. Thank you very much. Have a good one, Bob.
See you, man. See you soon.
1 in 5 Americans have learn a new language on their bucket list, and it's been on my list, and I'm actually working on my Spanish right now. If this sounds like you, make 2024 the year you finally check it off the list with Babbel. Be a better you in 2024 with Babbel, the science-backed language learning app that actually works. Don't pay hundreds of dollars for private tutors or waste hours on apps that don't really help you speak the language. Babbel's designed by real people for real conversations. You know we love the word real on FT. I was recently in South America, and I plan on going back after I tackle Babbel's courses that help you learn real-life conversation skills in a different language. The real help you need, like how to order food or ask for directions without having to consult language apps. Also, Babbel's speech recognition technology helps you improve your pronunciation and your accent. Here's a special limited time deal for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at FT at Babbel.com/foul territory. Get up to 60% off at Babbel.com/foul territory, spelled BABBEL.com/foul territory. Rules and restrictions may apply. With Babbel, you can learn everything you need to have real world conversations, from vocab words to culture, and all it takes is just 10 minutes a day.
Hey everybody, be sure to like and subscribe for more content.
We're back here every weekday, all year long, so do not miss an episode.
The videos are coming in all day. Here's another video you might enjoy.
Baseball the way it should be covered.